of the City of Evanston's Redistricting Committee. I am Councilmember Jonathan Nusma from the 4th Ward, chairing the committee meeting this evening. Looks like we don't have that many participants, so we should be able to make expeditious work of this. To make this official, Council Cummings, I think we have to suspend the rules to allow for remote participation. So
I'll move suspension of the rules.
It's been moved by
For remote
Councilmember
participation.
been moved by Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Burns. If you could throw a thumbs up or just indicate in the affirmative. All in favor? Aye. We are now have said the magic words and continue this can continue to meet remotely here. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our October 25th meeting. Councilmember Burns, if you'd be so kind.
So moved.
Second.
And seconded by Councilmember Burns. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting minutes from October 25th are approved. Okay, next on the agenda is public comment. And what we have done in previous meetings is what I would like to do in this meeting is rather than take public comment up front, let's hold open public comment for now. And as we go through each ward in turn, we'll throw open the microphone for public comment at that point. And I'm looking at who's participating online. I see Cindy Reed and a Robert's iPad and T, which I am guessing is Ms. Payden. Is there anyone else who desires to participate in this conversation as part of public comment?
And I think Robert's iPad is Bob Seidenberg.
Okay.
I think.
Bob, if that's you, thumbs up or something to indicate. Otherwise, feel free to jump in. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Also, let the record reflect that Councilmember Heracadis is joining us, council member from the 9th Ward, since the 9th Ward is on the agenda this evening. So give me 1 second here to close that, to share. My screen here, and can everybody see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. For those of you who have not been through this before, I'll do a quick overview. This will be repetitive for a lot of folks. And for all who might be seeing this for the first time, I'm going to go through this at a lightning pace. We do have a more in-depth version available with a recording of our town hall meeting in July. There's a town hall in English and a town hall in Spanish. So please refer to the committee webpage for links to those videos. So this is just a quick overview of the committee's work to date, and then we'll focus in turn on Ward 8 and Ward 9. So just as a reminder, the committee consists of council members Wynn, Nusma, Burns, and Reed, with the support of the City of Evanston's legal department. And we are governed, of course, by state law, which in fact does not require us to redistrict because our population has not fallen below 70,000 or above 90,000. However, we can redistrict for any other reason. And if we do redistrict, this is all according to state law, the wards shall be as nearly equal in population and shall be as compact and contiguous as practicable. So that's the governing state law. Of course, we have a federal law, which is worth a semester or two of graduate level classes. I'll condense this into a couple of slides. We're, of course, governed by the Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and a large body of case law. When state law says we have to keep if we redistrict, we want the populations to be equal. How equal is equal? Now, according to the federal law and the federal guidelines, anything greater, ideally, I should say, the population deviation between the smallest district and the largest district as a plus minus percentage should be no more than 10% total swing. We can justify a deviation up to 16.4% if it's based on legitimate considerations. Anything above 16.4% is considered unconstitutional per the 14th Amendment. So again, here's state law. If we look at our population over the last 6 censuses, we have not fallen above 70, fallen below 70 or above 90,000. So according to state law, we technically don't have to redistrict. Interesting to look at census data to compare 2010 and 2020 census data here, ward by ward. If we add up the numbers, we see an increasingly diverse community, largely in terms of an increase to our Hispanic population and Asian population. We are losing Black population. And we maintain 3 wards with a majority non-white population, wards 2, 5, and 8. This slide is the racial demographics as the Census Bureau defines them, and Hispanic Latino is broken out as a separate demographic. So here we can see, ward by ward, a growing Hispanic population in the city of Evanston. Here's what it looks like graphically. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. These slides are on the city's redistricting webpage. And let's look at the numbers. When we are making the decision to redistrict, we note that our population has grown in the city of Evanston to a total of just above 78,000. Some wards have grown more than others. And we find ourselves now with the largest ward, which is Ward 3, the largest by population, is 11.7% above average. And the smallest ward by population is the 9th ward, 8.7% below average, which is a total swing of 20.4. And if you recall the guidelines from the previous slide, anything above 16.4% is not allowed. So we do indeed have to redistrict according to federal guidelines. So let's look at very quickly the local guidelines. The last time we redistricted in the city of Evanston was after the 2000 census. That process was accomplished in 2003 with Ordinance 103-003 at that time. That ordinance enumerated a number of factors that were taken into account, some federal mandated, some state mandated, and then a list of factors that we were taking into account locally. And we're using this list as kind of a jumping off place for our discussion after the 2020 census. We're not limited to this list, but this allows us to at least start the conversation. So the process for this time around, in contrast to previous efforts, something we've done differently this time is to form a redistricting committee consisting of 4 council members. In the past, it was done a number of different ways. This committee has been meeting semi-regularly, nominally the 4th Tuesday of every month. And to date, we have formally confirmed our intent to redistrict. We have confirmed our desire to continue to have at least 3 majority non-white wards. We have also decided to pursue an incremental approach. Rather than throwing out the map and starting over with a blank sheet of paper, our desire is to minimize confusion and ideally get to as close to a 0% deviation as possible by just adjusting borders on the margins. And then as part of this process, we've developed a community engagement plan, which we have spent the last several months involved in. I'll stress at this point, we have not formally considered a new map. Our intent is to go through a public engagement process, hear from each ward, and that includes at redistricting committee meetings, as well as conversation at ward meetings, to get that public input first before the committee draws several new maps. So here's where we are in that timeline. From July of this year through January of next year, we're very deliberately going through kind of ward by ward and doing this public engagement process. The committee, having heard the public engagement by the end of January, will then kind of retire to chambers and draft a handful of new maps for consideration, 1, 2, 3 maps. We don't know for sure. It's certainly something less than last time around when there were more than 15 maps that were presented, which did not make for a very efficient conversation. So we will release a finalist round of maps in February, do another round of public engagement on those proposed maps. And then this committee will recommend to the council a new map in April of 2023. And then the council will approve that map in May of 2023. This is our plan anyway. And I'll point out this is well before our legal required deadline, which would be sometime in November of 2024. And it's almost as early as we can do it because there are 2 wards up for a special election in April next year. And we didn't want to rush through this process and try and at the very last minute with regards to the April election, put a new map in place and leave people confused as to who they'd be voting for. So as soon as the new council or the 2 new council members are sworn in May, we will very shortly thereafter approve the new map, and the new wards will become official at that point. At least that's our intent at this point. So public engagements schedule, we're about halfway through doing wards 8 and 9 tonight. 1st and 3rd wards are up for January 2nd, and then a 5th ward focus on January 26th. And again, to any council members on this Zoom meeting tonight, as chairman of the committee, I'm happy to come to a ward meeting and have this conversation with members of your ward directly. So with that, let's go through ward by ward. And if any ward is going to be fairly easy or the most straightforward, it might be the 8th ward. Given that it's the population has not deviated very much, and it only borders 2 other wards. So focusing on the 8th ward for the next few minutes, we find that the 8th ward has increased by a total of 166 people. And that puts the 8th ward 1.9% above average. Looking at the 2 neighboring wards, the 3rd ward is the largest by, that should be a comma, 1,021. And the 9th ward is one of the smallest at 759 people below average. Actually, the smallest at 759 people below average, or 8.7 below average. So logically, it would make sense for some of the 8th ward to go into the 9th ward here, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We do want to hear take the public feedback into account. taking a look at the demographics here of the 8th Ward, comparing 2010 to 2020 census data. We see a growing Hispanic population. We see across the board in a number of wards, an increase in the number of folks who have identified as two or more races. 8th Ward has lost white people and lost some Black people, but gained overall. And again, there is, if we want to focus, if you want to focus on these columns here, that's the 8th Ward, and this red line represents the average. And so ideally, after we go through this process, every single bar would end right at that red line. So zooming in for a closer look at the demographic map, that's what it looks like. 8th Ward is, I would say, probably the most diverse of Evanston's wards at this point. And so now we come to the kind of the meat of the conversation. If we're looking at the 8th Ward and taking a logical and kind of conscious look at what blocks we might want to move here and what blocks we might want to move there. And so at this point, I will pause to see if any members of the redistricting committee would like to weigh in. If not, we can entertain public comment.
Yeah, I'll just jump in since I'm a member of the committee and we're talking about the 8th Ward. Certainly I think it makes sense for, part of the 8th Ward to be, allocated to the 9th Ward. I think it's important for the 8th Ward to maintain its diversity. And as the ward that I think now has the largest Black population, just by number, I think it's important to maintain that aspect here as well.
Great. Council Member Burns, do you want to weigh in here? He's in the car, so you probably can't see the map. And is there anybody else, any member of the public that would like to weigh in?
Yeah, hi, this is Tina Payton.
Good evening, Ms. Payton.
Could you expand the map a little bit more? So what you may have to do is put some of 8 into 9 and
Excuse me a second, Tina, are you asking me to adjust my screen tonight so you can see it better?
Yeah, I just want to see a little further up is the
just zoom
show
up.
the whole.
Well, we're going to talk about Ward 9 separately, so we're going to get there.
I know that, but the point is you want to see. Yes, that's better, because then I know we're going to talk about 9 and so forth, but you want to try to maybe put certain places in 9 and then look at the other ones at the same time. I know we're going to be talking about 9, but I just wanted to see the other map so we could see what options there were.
I think there are essentially 3 theoretical blocks or chunks of territory that we could move. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about this backwards. We're going to have to take away some blue blocks and make them orange. And so there's still maybe 3 theoretical places to start. These blocks between Dodge and Florence here, this block north of Austin and between Oakton, and then the Custer to
Yeah,
it's just like
yeah,
tracks over there.
I think we can be a bit more, intentional than that, particularly on preserving some of the diversity in the ward. But yeah, I think that is a logical way to approach it.
Yeah, and so with their, Councilmember Reed, if you're moving some blocks, if you had to make a choice, is there any reason to consider one of these sections rather than the other, or
Yeah, I
is it
would
really
be
kind of a function of
particularly.
math?
Yeah, I think I think it also makes sense to keep like communities together. So I do
Right.
think that for the areas that are, there's half of my ward that is primarily single family homes, and that is more in line with what's going on in the 9th ward. And then there's another half of my ward that is a mix of single family homes and apartment buildings, and there's a lot more density. And I think it makes sense to keep those folks together as well. And so if I was looking at it, I think I'd say the blocks not at Dodge, but Dewey and Florence make sense to be looped into the 9th ward, because those are more single family homes aligned with the 9th ward in the community. But the area that's near Dodge actually has a bit more density. There's more townhomes. It's less affluent area, and so there's, I think, more commonality between the rest of the ward in that area.
And so to you, it would make more sense to move these 2 blocks right here rather than this 1 block north of Austin.
Yeah, and potentially the Austin block as well. But
yeah,
certainly I think those 2 blocks.
Yeah, and it's also point out we're certainly not required to do anything with Ward 8.
Sure.
Right. If we can get Ward 9 where it wants to be with other neighboring wards, it's possible. It's theoretically possible, at least, that the borders of Ward 8 remain unchanged.
Well, that's what I was suggesting, to maybe start with 9 first, because that has the biggest deficit.
How about we do this? Let's just continue to talk about 9, and part of the conversation about Ward 9 will be Ward 8. So let's just take Tina's advice and keep cruising through here. So without repeating most of what I just said, Ward 9 is undersized by 759 residents, which puts it 8.7% below average, or the smallest ward. And so I don't envision a scenario where we don't make the 9th ward bigger, since we're shooting for a total swing of ideally less than 10%, but theoretically as close to 0 as possible. So let's keep looking at the 9th ward here, and looking at the 9th ward demographics, total population. Despite the fact that Ward 9th is the smallest by percentage, population of the 9th ward has still grown by 318 people. The 9th ward, that growth has come from Hispanic and residents identifying as 2 or more races. Some growth in the Asian population and Native American population, with some shrinkage in both the white and Black populations. So there's that one, if you want to take a quick look at that. That one, boom. So there is our zoomed up look at the 9th ward, and we're looking for, ideally, some way to get to add 759 people to the 9th ward.
Can you just go straight across at Washington all the way to where it says plus 432? Can you go straight across?
Yeah, so this would be a logical place to look, I would think. That the data that we're considering tonight doesn't have block level population data. So it's possible if we took that whole chunk, it would be more than the amount we would need to add to the 9th ward. But that is certainly some place to look. We'll be taken out of the 2nd ward.
Yeah, because you have quite a bit extra in the 2nd ward.
Right.
So if you did that, then it seemed like that might cover what you need, because you don't want to take anything out of your ward because you need people. So
Right.
And Jonathan, I think, you know, I kind of echo some of the things that Devon said about kind of keeping the neighborhoods and using kind of the feel of, you know, the different neighborhoods. Yeah, I think, you know, looking at Dodge, the Dodge and Main area, you know, there's kind of already that 4-block area that seems, you know, from Dewey to Dodge and Maine to, I think that's Cleveland, kind of seems that 4 blocks. Again,
These
you know,
four
with,
right here. You
yeah,
can see
that
my
makes,
cursor.
that very much seems like a logical
Yeah.
neighborhood, like kind of border.
Yeah.
It is interesting that, you know, without knowing the per block
Right.
census data, where exactly that puts us. But I mean, that's a in my discussion with residents, it's been kind of because we're growing and not shrinking. It's kind of an easier conversation.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, typically potentially shrinking. So, but those I've heard also kind of make sense, because there are people over there that are like, why are we in the second ward? Like, it seems, you know, anywhere you go, you're going to have a line.
Yeah.
One side of the block is, but that kind of seems like a logical starting point.
It does kind of, it would make more sense to have the border down the middle of Dodge than the middle of Dewey.
Yeah. There's Deborah Jetzer. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. She has her hand up.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, Miss Jetzer, if you would like to jump in here.
Hi, thank you. Councilmember Nusma, could you go back to the large map while I'm making my comments?
Sure.
Because it'll be easier to see. Thank you. I'm just adding up and looking at, if you take the overage in Ward 8 and in Ward 2, you had actual numbers on the other one. It was about 600 people. It looks to me, unless you want to, right now, Ward 3 has this natural boundary of the train line. So if you don't want to mess with that, the only thing that I can see is going to need to happen is everything from Ward 8 up has to shift upward north. Because if you gave what's overage in 8 and 2 to 9, you're still short about 100 and I don't see the other numbers because this is percentages.
Yeah.
So you'd have to grab out of 4, thus pushing 4 north. So it's almost like starting with 8 and then moving up. You're going to have to pick and choose and grab as you go up.
Yeah, and certainly there's a domino effect,
Right.
or a transitive property.
Otherwise, there's just not
up.
enough. There's just not enough leftover to fill the huge gap in 9, and 9 is in the center.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of
Yeah.
attack it from all sides.
Yeah.
You kind of have to push it out.
Well, what we might see is how, like, if we can move a little bit of 8 to 9 and a decent chunk of 2 to 9, what does that do to the numbers?
Yeah.
I think if you go back to the other one, you can see the numbers better than.
Well, I'll just throw in there, you know, the term that Chair Nusma used earlier was, you know, equally. How equal do we have to be? Are we going for equal, or just equal? And I think, you know, if we have a bit of overage or underage, that gets us, you know, within a few percentage points rather than this large swing, I think we're still in a good place. And I think most of us might still look at that as a success.
I think another thing to keep in mind, which, you know, when we're looking at these numbers, you know, one large apartment building or, you know, new development can really shift the numbers. And so I think, you know, I think once we get those kind of block by block numbers, it's going to be a little bit easier to figure out, because there is some uncertainty as to, like, you know, because obviously like 5 blocks of single family homes is going to have a much smaller population impact than potentially 1 block downtown that has 1 large apartment building. So
Exactly.
once we get those kind of more firm census numbers, I think things will come to light a little bit easier than
Right.
currently.
And we have, with regards to multifamily buildings, we have had some discussions along the lines of, we know there are some new multifamily buildings under construction. There will be more before the next census. Should we take those into account? And officially, the answer is no. We're obligated to follow the 2020 census data. That those numbers are what they are. In the back of our minds, if we want to try and maybe kind of future-proof this and do our best so that when the 2030 census rolls around, we're still fairly tight. That's something we might want to think of when the committee is drawing our maps, but we're officially obligated to balance the numbers that are in front of us. So Councilmember Hadakaris, we had a discussion when we talked about the 4th ward about these blocks here of Main Street, which are now in the 4th ward, as you can see. And 4th ward needs to add territory as well, but theoretically we could pick that up elsewhere. And since the 9th ward needs to expand, we talked theoretically about what if we put these 2 blocks in the 9th ward. I tend to like the idea of keeping those Main Street businesses in 1 ward, but open to your thoughts on the matter as well.
I mean, so one of the things, I think that's a good point, Jonathan. The 9th ward is pretty unique in that there's not a main like business district.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it kind of makes sense to keep those in the 4th ward, kind of keeping the main dumpster mile, kind of that overview. Again, and I'm trying to think, like looking at the map, like the new multifamily building at the old Vogue Fabrics would be, that's in the 4th ward, right? That's on the right side.
Yeah, that would
because it's right there at the corner. Yeah,
that would be right there.
so that's something to keep in mind too, as we, and I off the top of my head, I don't know how many units that is, but yeah, all these all larger developments are definitely impactful when it comes to this type of work.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll just on that same, sorry to jump in, but on that same note, in the 8th ward on Howard Street, to factor this in as we're thinking about the 9th ward, we've got the new senior apartment, Dan Rainey Senior Apartments. We've got another development that's going up on Chicago and Howard, and then hopefully we'll have in the very near future pretty large development also on Howard, potentially. But we have 2 definite large developments that are one online now that's quite a few units, and the other one that's going to add another decent number of units and folks.
Was the Anne Rainey building inhabited during the census?
No, it was
okay
not.
So those would be new people.
Yeah
So again, we can't officially count those people, but knowing that they exist, maybe we undersize the 8th ward by just a smidge, so that the numbers still are what they need to be for 2020, but we position ourselves for 2030 for potentially not having to redistrict at all. Juan and Devon as well, and anyone else who wants to weigh in for that matter. Our current map has borders that are on streets rather than alleys. How would you feel, and this is a theoretical discussion, but it could apply right here, about drawing a ward map down an
Where's your
alley
cursor?
rather than on a street.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing your cursor, but yes, the idea, I like the idea. You said right here, and I just don't see your
Yeah,
cursor.
so right here, between Custer and Sherman, for example, where the new Vogue project is going in.
I think that could potentially help too, because I think sometimes there's some confusion with folks when, you know, their neighbors across the street are in one ward versus the other, potentially using the alley. And it depends, you know, then I don't think any of us have this map in the alleyways memorized here, but it could be a useful way to kind of keep the neighborhoods intact when doing this work, and also give a little bit more wiggle room with picking up population one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's something we should definitely consider.
Yeah, I think it's kind of case by case. I live on Dempster, and our across the street neighbors, because it's a busy street, are, you know, we don't feel as, you know, much of a community with them as we do the neighbors across the alley behind us. But in other cases, you might, you know, it might be different. So it sounds like the committee, at least Devon and myself and Councilmember Hadikatis as a temporary committee member, if we could elevate you to that status, or at least comfortable with the idea.
Yes, I like the idea a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. So Juan, looking at how to expand the Ninth Ward, it's probably pretty obvious that we'll be at least adding these blocks here. But if you had to
And I
choose,
think those 8th Ward blocks as well should be
yeah, probably those ones down there as well.
just 2. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, further, what's over here?
So, and that's a good point. There's kind of a natural like border here with the Cleveland Hartree. Like it does not go through.
Right.
So I mean, I think that those I would be less likely to pick up those blocks there. Plus, I'm not sure, you know, a lot of this, like this is, you know, the food for less it's a lot of businesses.
Yeah,
there.
there's not a lot of population in this big
Yes.
chunk here.
Yeah, so I don't think that would move the needle as much as the
But
because I know like east of Dodge there are, you know, the single family homes, and there's a couple apartment buildings. And I
yeah.
see Nick has his.
Oh, thank you, Juan.
Yes.
Nick, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Chair if the committee is considering taking any population out of the 2nd Ward for the 5th Ward. I know that we haven't gotten there yet, but as we talk about which blocks to consider for the 2nd Ward, the committee, you know, the natural, I guess, another bordering ward that is losing population or has lost population is the 5th
Yeah.
Ward. So I don't want you to snatch all the population for the 9th Ward, and then we get to the 5th Ward in January and we're like, wait a minute, we, you know, haven't considered.
Yeah, good point. And we did have that conversation when we
Other
talked about the
meetings
2nd
we
Ward.
talked about, the last 2 meetings, we talked about the 5th Ward and moving people from the 6th and 7th Ward to the 5th Ward. So
And
Which I want to be clear, and I will talk about this more. I do not support that. I do support, however, 2nd Ward into the 5th Ward, and I don't want to get caught up on this because we'll have a big meeting coming up in January, I believe, to discuss the 5th Ward. But Council Cummings, I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's one of the downsides of having this kind of ward specific, word by word conversation is that we can't draw a ward map in isolation of the rest of the city. So, but we did have a discussion about the second ward several months ago and talked about moving some of these blocks here up into the fifth ward. And to the point that Juan made earlier, there are a few multifamily buildings here that can make a pretty big difference. So just something that we'll have to, be aware of when we sit down and actually draw the map. And incidentally, the software we're going to use allows us to do these calculations really quickly and automatically. So it'll be fun to do that work when we get to it. So I think what we're agreeing is that it probably makes sense to move some of the 8th ward into the 9th ward. Also being aware that the current population of the 8th ward is actually larger than reported. So if we want to future proof, maybe we even make the 8th ward, slightly, less than par. Move at least some of these blocks, at least these blocks here, east of Dodge, from the 2nd into the 9th, potentially some other territory here as well. Crown currently is in the 4th ward. Yeah, there's no population in this block here. I don't know, it kind of seems like Crown maybe would make more logical sense in the 2nd ward than the 4th ward. And having this, Main Street is a fairly firm kind of community border here. So to move everything south of Main Street from the 2nd ward into the 9th ward doesn't seem like a bad idea. Would you agree, Juan?
I could, like, geographically, it kind of makes sense. I'm
Yeah.
not sure without seeing the actual population. I think
Right.
that probably put it as too big. That would be my initial guess. But yeah, we can. I mean, all this I think will come a little bit clearer when we see the block by block numbers. But yeah,
Exactly. Okay, this was a fairly quick conversation. Does anybody else want to weigh in with any thoughts or comments or suggestions?
I would just ask the committee too. I know that the train tracks are seen as sort of a little bit of a border, but as we move north in the city, those train tracks are less of a border. Is the committee considering anything in the 3rd ward?
So one of the things I think, and I'll just share my opinion, at least for the 9th, it seems like when you're looking at the neighborhoods, it's kind of hard to know, that scene, like the other side of the tracks. I don't really know as much what's going on, like me personally there. It would seem, I don't know how many buildings or how many blocks we'd have to pick up. It just seems like it's just kind of like a natural border. That would be my kind of take on that.
Yeah, and I know that one of the factors the committee is considering is continuity in community.
Yeah.
Right. So if that doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. I just wanted to point out, because obviously the 3rd ward is going to be a great source of picking up people.
Yeah.
And we only we don't count dead people, right, Nick?
Only in Cicero. We can't dead folks in Cicero.
All right.
And only at
Cicero's a
election time.
forbidden-
Only
we
election
don't talk about.
We don't talk about
Cicero here.
Cicero. Yeah. All right.
It just, I see,
I will say that, sorry, Juan, go ahead.
after you're done, Devon,
Oh, okay.
Ms. Reed,
And I see,
has her.
Cindy Reed
has
has
her-
her hands up as
Yeah.
well. So we'll go
Oh.
Juan, Devon, and then Ms. Reed.
I don't have anything. I was
Okay.
just pointing out that she
Ms.
has
Reed
her
can
hand
go
up.
before me.
Got it. Ms. Reed, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you, Attorney Cummings. I'm glad you brought the third ward up because I'm wondering, the third ward is way over, right? So
Yeah.
I guess unless I missed something, what are we doing to split that ward up?
If I could summarize the conversation as I recall it, when we focused on the third ward at a redistricting committee meeting, it was fairly clear that the portion of the third ward north of Dempster would have to go somewhere else to either the first or the fourth ward. We also talked about in these, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but some more of the third ward west of Chicago going to the fourth ward. But again, this was all part of kind of a qualitative discussion ward by ward. We're not making any firm decisions until we take all the input in and are looking at the whole map. But yeah, I think I would be surprised if the third ward maintained any territory north of Dempster.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The other question I have, I do agree with you. I think Robert Crown should go back to the second ward. Thank you very much.
What can I ask? What your reasoning is behind that suggestion?
If I'm not mistaken, I think that when Baptiste was in, I think Robert Crown was a part of the second ward. I have no idea why it was moved into, probably because of redistricting. It was moved into the fourth. I have no clue. But there are no residents there, but I don't know why it's not a part of the second ward. It's confusing because I live over near the area and you got right across the street is the second ward. And then you got Robert Crown is the fourth ward. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we have, we've talked about that. And if you look at the census map, let me zoom in here. Can we get the census map, as I recall, does show a handful of people in this block. And I think that's just kind of a relic of how the government computer counts things and how it randomly distributes population because of privacy concerns. It can't pinpoint people in exact locations. So I think this block might show up as having a population of 2 or 3 people, even though we know no one actually lives there.
Are there, and I know this sounds like a silly question, but are there homes sort of around the park that could be on those borders?
There are homes.
So are there homes on Main and homes on Lee?
It's divided by a street.
There are a couple homes right here, right the tip of my arrow. This is Washington. This is Washington School here. But there are a couple of homes right here.
But none on the northern border of Lee and the southern border of, I guess, what street is that? North of Washington. Main Street.
There are none here. No, there are some on the south side of Lee between Florence and Ashland.
But they're in a different ward, is that correct?
The houses are in the fourth ward.
Okay. Because right on the other side of that is the second ward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's confusing in here.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's very confusing.
Can you get a hold of a map that, can you get a hold of a map that has the actual numbers of?
We
the-
do. There's the software that we're going to be using to redistrict does have the actual numbers, but the published data that we will be using doesn't go house by house. It's randomized by block. So with like,
Isn't there census data?
yeah, that is
has
the census.
information?
That is the census data.
Yeah, it's randomized by block. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with one thing. We were talking about the third ward. And I just wanted to note, you know, I appreciate Nick noting that we don't have to focus just on, you know, the train track being a natural barrier. I'm really interested in, there's a, you know, again, there's keeping areas and constituents that are alike together. There's the new development that's happening in the 9th Ward, right near the cemetery, just off of Chicago Avenue, that will be a more, you know, lower income or moderate income development. And, you know, I think, you know, if we were to jump across the tracks and to make some moves to, again, put more like neighborhoods in the 9th Ward and maybe use that to capture a bit for the 8th, if we drop too low, I think it would make sense to get that block where that development is, in order to, you know, make sure that their, you know, voices aren't diluted amongst, you know, a very different community that has very different interests maybe than the rest of those residents.
Where is that development, Devon?
That's going to be right at the corner, right across the train tracks here at South Boulevard, just off of the cemetery near South Boulevard in Chicago.
Down here.
Yeah, right in there. Exactly.
That one down there. Right. Okay.
Yep.
I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge Deborah Jetzer has her hand up again.
Thanks. Thanks, Juan. Ms. Jetzer, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. Just going back to, I am a resident of Ward 1. I live in Sherman Plaza. And I recall this being mentioned at a previous meeting, or maybe even at a council meeting, but the desire perhaps to have multiple representation in the downtown area. And right
Mhm.
now, I know Ward 4 and Ward 1 have, like Fountain Square is split in half between 1 and 4. But are the committee members still looking at getting more ward representation in the actual downtown area? And how would you go about doing that?
We have that. Thank you for bringing that up. And maybe I should have mentioned that earlier. We have discussed that and kind of reconfirmed our desire to continue having the downtown represented by ideally 3 council members, at least two. Right now it's represented by the 1st, 2nd, and 4th. But the 2nd is oversized and needs to lose territory. So we don't want to have downtown represented by just 1 council member.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. Have you looked at which other wards? If it was still 1 and 4, and I know 3 has too many, so that's going to keep getting pushed down to more the Dempster mile.
Mhm.
But what about looking at 5 coming in to somehow get more influence from 5 into the downtown?
If that might be a possibility, if this portion of the 2nd ward is moved to the 5th ward or becomes the 5th ward.
No.
But yeah, because this section of the 2nd ward has a bit of downtown, but it's not kind of central to the core of the 2nd ward, we're not quite sure what's going to happen with this section of the 2nd ward here.
Okay, and then looking at Ward 7, is there any discussion about reshape? It's such a strange kind of claw-shaped ward.
Yeah, and we did have that discussion at our meeting last month about, with regards to 7th ward and 1st ward, somehow making them a little bit more compact.
Okay. And back to Ward 1, my concern about getting more representation there is because there are so many significant things going on in Ward 1 in the downtown area with developments and possible developments or
Mhm.
redevelopments that I just think it's critical to get much more, not just influence in ideas, but actual help in doing planning and recruiting and all of that needs to go into revitalizing the downtown area. So the more the merrier.
Yeah. Yeah, the committee has discussed that and seems to be heading in the same direction you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, does anybody else want to weigh in here?
I just have one more quick
Sure.
question. When you think about, in previous censuses, long time ago, I actually worked for the census. So, and I know it's where you live on April 1st. It's a snapshot in time,
Right.
which makes it really, I'm looking at Sherman Plaza, which when I asked management how many people live in the building, 250 units, it could be anywhere, I was told, from 350 to 500 people. They're not
Mhm.
even sure how to count it because of owners versus snowbirds versus Northwestern students and all of that. And I
Mhm.
wonder how many more numbers are impacted like that throughout the city because of it being a university town. And is there a way to get numbers that are more accurate than just the census?
There may be, but we are obligated to use the census numbers in this process.
Okay,
But in fact, we had a conversation along those lines last time when talking about the student population and the fact that the pandemic was in full swing in April of 2020. So we might have undercounted, in a normal year, there might have been a larger student population in town. But we will never know for sure, and we're obligated to use the census data as published.
okay, thank you.
All right, well, this might have been one of the most efficient conversations, maybe due to the simplicity of the issues at hand with the 8th and 9th wards. But unless there is anybody else who wants to weigh in, committee members or members of the public, going once, going twice.
And it's gone.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you for joining us this evening, everybody. I will declare this meeting adjourned, and I wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Have a good night.
Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Thank you
Take
for
care,
the
everyone.
opportunity.
All
Bye.
right. Thanks, everybody.